Welcome to the Way Outside the Nest podcast. I am your host, Hollywood J, with so much to say. Let's start the show.
Nah,
Explain what happened.
I just dropped him. It's gonna be better.
What can you learn from this experience, I guess?
Ain't nothing to learn. Catch the damn ball.
It finally happened, y'all. It took a month and some change, but the Eagles finally lost a game. Chaos in the streets. Am I panicking? No. Did Jalen Hurts look good? No. I am actually quite excited for this team to get humbled. Now, this show is going to be a little special for me. I'm going to bring on a frequent contributor now, Tyler. We're going to talk about last night's Eagles game, or yesterday's Eagles game, whatever you want to call it. I was thinking about it all last night. We're going to talk about it. We're going to discuss how he feels about the Eagles season. But man,
Hurts with pressure coming, steps away, in trouble. Hurts with jets draped all over him, throws to the sideline for A.J. Brown. Michael Carter II was hanging on to Jalen Hurts, who got rid of it for 8.
chaos. It finally happens. It happens. It happens to the best of the best teams. It happens to undefeated teams. It happens to teams who think they can't be defeated. They get humbled. I'm excited. I'm excited they got humbled. In that humbling, there were lessons. In that humbling, people played well, including the defense. The defense is getting no credit. I get it. The offense is a full focus. We lost, so the offense is a full focus. But the way the defense played, I know that's Zach Wilson. But look at all those injuries on defense. Look at all those injuries on defense. And they played hard. And they fought. And they gave us chance after chance. Even if the offense just feels like it could. When you can move the ball up and down the field, that is a blessing and a curse. And the Eagles felt so blessed that they never felt the curse. Well, the curse came.
Jets on the field, really rotating personnel, and here they bring the house towards Hurts. The pass is deflected and intercepted. Quinnen Williams, big man on the run to the 45-yard line.
You win some and you lose some. That is my take, but enough of my takes. It's time to bring in Tyler. Once again, you will find Tyler on my Twitter. You can find me at _outside_the_nest. And if you do, you will see a lot of Tyler. I retweet a lot of his tweets. They're good, solid information. You can find him at TYLHappy. And tell him to change his name to @TYNFL. Stop playing with the people, Tyler. Anyways, without further ado, my good friend Tyler on his thoughts on what happened yesterday at the Eagles game. Let's get it. All right, so we have Tyler on the line. We got Tyler here. Tyler, give us your thoughts on the Eagles game yesterday. How do you feel about that?
This game, I think, is going to come back to look exactly like Washington did last year. I think it was week 8 or 9. I guess it was week 9 because they were undefeated at the time. And I have no idea what week it was in 2021. But it was against the Giants, and it was the game Jalen Hurts had 3 interceptions after the bye week. And I think that's exactly how this game is going to end up looking on the when you finally want to go back and look back and see what went wrong in the season, if you want to call it what went wrong in the season, or if you just want to look at what happened. Just nothing worked. Nothing went their way except for the defense.
First third down of the drive. They're 0 for 3 on third today. Wilson in trouble, and he's sacked. Jordan Davis.
Sean Desai still managed to make some answers on the defense, and I think he's probably got the least amount of, what you want to call it, blame. He's got about the least amount of blame going on right now throughout the whole year. But just nothing worked. 3 interceptions, 4 turnovers. I don't know, what are we up to? Half a dozen injuries just from that game alone. It yeah, nothing went their way, and it was a game that I don't think they were allowed to get the win, and I think that's why the Jets get it with less than 90 seconds left.
And the Jets were loving it too. That coach was loving that victory. All the trash talk. It was a good one for the Jets.
Yeah, I think it was something that was definitely coming for them. It was definitely something that was coming for the Eagles. If the game against the Rams wasn't a trap game, then I think this definitely was. There was a lot riding on this game, and now we saw how it ended.
So a big question that I have is, do you think the Eagles are still a Super Bowl team?
Oh, I don't like the answer to this question. I don't like the answer I'm going to give, because I'm going to say no, but it's not because of the roster. Well, it's kind of because of the roster. It's not because of the roster. It's because of the condition of the roster. Red zone play calling, I think, has gotten worse, if anything. So that's something fun to look at 6 weeks into the season. We're a third of the way through, and they only managed to get the one touchdown yesterday. I guess they got two, but that's it. That's all I got. And if they are able to execute a little bit better, they're definitely back on top. But I think they just suffered a lot of mistakes, and if anybody that got injured yesterday, or if anybody that got injured last week or during practice this week is gone long term, who's a starter, whether or not they're not somebody who's doing all the work as a starter, I think they're in a lot of trouble coming up here.
The injuries are pretty critical. We did get news that Lane Johnson's ankle isn't too bad, so we can breathe a sigh of relief.
That's good. That's the best news that can come out of that loss. But I think, unfortunately, with the teams they're about to go up against, I think no Lane Johnson I think they're going to say it's a high ankle sprain, which I feel like is going to mean he's out for probably 2 weeks. And I think that offensive line struggled without him against the Jets, and they might not struggle as badly against the Dolphins, but it's not going to look great against the Commanders or the Cowboys 2 weeks and 3 weeks after that if he's out, like I say, for more than 1 week.
We are definitely in a tough stretch of the schedule. Not ideal that Lane Johnson will miss any time for the next couple games here. What would you say between Brian Johnson and Jalen Hurts? What's going on there? What's the chemistry like right now?
I think they're. I don't know what the game plan was. I don't want to go back and look at the film for this game as much as I'd like to. There's nothing really good to watch. I can't think of anything amazingly outstanding to benefit either of them. I think it wasn't a brotherly shove, but whatever they ran to start the game and ended up getting converted to a touchdown after it was a turnover on downs. Mm-hmm. Cool. There was that 3rd and 2 play to Boston Scott that goes for about 10 yards, and that's about the two things I'm excited for. I just think it was rough from everybody, and I think part of the issue is, from what I can remember seeing, is I think they were giving away a lot of what the play calls were based on what personnel they rolled out with and how they were lining up. There was one play, I think it was late in the 3rd or early in the 4th, and it was a handoff to Swift. I think it went for maybe 3 yards, and then immediately after that, there's nobody in the backfield, and they lined Swift up as a wide receiver. And I understand they rolled into the season without more than 4 real wide receivers on the team, but when you're down 3 or when you're down to 3, I think you've got to figure out a way to either get Britton Covey on the field, or you've got to figure out a way to get Devin Allen on the field. Oh. You're going to go from having Swift in the backfield, and then you're going to line him up as a receiver immediately after. It's almost like it's like when someone's tipping their pitches in baseball. You know what's coming, because they're not going to run the ball with nobody in the backfield. And if it's a QB run, well, we've seen how that's gone for the majority of plays so far this year. And so I think it's just not getting prettier, and it's not getting better if we're not going to have Lane Johnson for any amount of time, and if we're not going to have Cam Jurgens for, I think, a minimum of 2 more weeks. And that's if he comes back after 4 weeks, because I haven't heard much about his injury other than it's a foot injury, and I think they've kept rather quiet about it the rest of the way.
Do you think they can turn this around and become a dynamic offense this season?
I think they can. They most definitely showed off that they can in multiple games so far. And I think the credit's due during those games because, I mean, they went up against some very good defensive-minded coaches, from Bill Belichick week 1, Brian Flores week 2, they Todd Bowles week 3. They've shown that they can kind of multitask here. I mean, we had DeAndre Swift put up over 100 yards back-to-back weeks. He had 175 against the Vikings. And I mean, they've just stuff hasn't clicked, and I think this was the game to kind of make it click, and I think injuries piled up, and then the game plan got ahead of themselves. I mean, Hurts still threw for over 300 yards against the Rams, but I think something went wrong in this week's game plan, and I don't know if it's because they overlooked the Jets. I don't know if they thought they could just throw flashy, deep, highlight reel plays every other throw, because that's what a lot of stuff looked like. And I think by the second half, when they weren't really moving the ball, you're still watching AJ and Smith run 20-plus yards downfield, and I think they should have just been trying to chunk down the field. That opening drive was 16 plays. And it was 19. It was 19 plays. Yeah. And nothing else, I think, breaks 10. No. The missed field goal was 9. And the third interception was 8. But that was 19 plays. They took up almost 10 minutes of the first quarter, and they did short passes, they did long passes, they ran the ball, Jalen ran the ball, and I think they just got away from a lot of that, and it really just kind of screwed them up. And I understand why, you're thinking there's a bunch of backup practice squad cornerbacks, but I don't understand why you can still beat a bad secondary without having to go deep. And I think the final drive with that 4th down to Smith in double coverage is a great example as to why that wasn't working for them.
How much effect is this Jalen Hurts overconfidence, and how much is it just not being solid on that right tackle spot as far as how the game played out yesterday?
I think it's not solid on the whole right side of the offensive line, really. I mean, Sua Opeta played a great game against the Rams, but when you still have Lane Johnson in, of course, that's an entirely different question. I think I'd like to see how this game might have played out if Lane Johnson survives more than the first 10 plays of the game. But I think there was a lot of discomfort on that side, and I think there's a bunch of plays too. There's going to be two big things here. There's a lot of plays I saw this morning where Jordan Mailata is just getting absolutely outworked on the left side as well. You could barely even tell that it was Driscoll, the one causing a lot of problems on the right. And I know for a fact that there's many plays where they were bringing the house down on that right side. And like always against the blitz, I don't know if it's Jalen Hurts or if it's the Eagles, but they have absolutely nothing for it still. 3 years later, and it's almost a guaranteed loss of yards or something just like, not happening. 0 incompletion, running back gets stuffed at the line. Jalen tries to, run out and either gets 1 yard or gets nowhere. And so I think there's just there's going to be a good growing pain there. I think similar to what we had to deal with in, I believe it was 2018 or I think it was 2019 with Carson Wentz when they had those 13 different offensive line combinations in 12 games or what. I don't know what it was. they were rolling out absolute nobodies on the offensive line, and it was a different guy every week.
Well, I'm really glad we got to talk about the offense, but I feel like, and in this podcast episode, I already wanted to say that I got to tip my cap to the defense. The defense has been playing amazing all season, and I want to talk a little bit about that defense, even though it was against Zach Wilson. What would you grade that performance?
I'm just trying to take a quick look here. I just want to see what everything looks like here between the Jets. They held them realistically to 12 points. They held them down to 12 points for 3.5 quarters of the game. And I think Sean Desai, without Darius Slay, he loses Eli Ricks early in the game, I believe. I think it was before halftime. He loses Reed Blankenship. He loses Bradley Roby. He loses Milton Williams. And they still held him to 12 points. Like, even if it's just Zach Wilson, yeah, exactly. They were cooking. They didn't have Jalen Carter. And as much of a wonder he's been for 5 weeks, they still managed to put up great numbers. They held Zach Wilson to 186 yards. They held Garrett Wilson to 90. Not that it was pretty, but with, I don't know, what are we at, cornerback 3 or 4 covering him on the outside, or it wasn't pretty, but they managed to still make those adjustments in the second half. And I think Sean Desai is doing crazy things that Gannon could have never dreamed of. And unfortunately, I think if it keeps up with him, I think they are going to be in need of another defensive coordinator next year.
And I agree. He's almost playing to the point where he might be a one-and-done coach, which would be a shame.
And it's starting to look that way. But I think after he had a good year or two in Chicago. He had a pretty good year in Seattle, and now he's just having an absolutely phenomenal year here. I mean, if they're not doing something to keep him around, there's most definitely going to be a team in the next couple weeks that will probably fire somebody, and he could be the number one answer if they're looking for somebody who's a little bit more of a defensive-minded coach.
Well, I hope that's not true, but I think you're right, too.
It's looking that way. I mean, he held the Rams to, I think, just over 100 yards in the second half. I don't have the numbers for the Jets, but, I mean, with what he was working with, the Jets could barely move the ball. Like, let's be real here. The offense gave the Jets great field position numerous times, and at best, they came away with a field goal.
Facts. Yeah, I think
there's one. I don't know which drive it was, but I think there's one where the defense even managed to push them out of field goal range.
Oh yeah, I do remember that play.
And that was that's why the defense is doing well, and that's why I don't have complaints about them, because there's good stuff happening. I think there's still issues, and there still is, but there's a bigger injury picture in the way that it's hard for me to go. The defense has to step things up because they're hemorrhaging yards, they're giving up, and I mean, hell, they are still giving up all those short yardage plays. But come the second half, the defense adjusts. The defense shuts down what was working for the opposing offense. I feel like they're almost 6 for 6 now going up against that. But with, I don't know, I see 3 cornerbacks minimum that are injured, 4 if you want to count Maddox, and the list is just going to keep growing for them, and they're just still managing to do phenomenal jobs. And now it's the offense's turn to finally do something, and if they can't, then I think they're going to be adding another loss to the column next Sunday.
And one play that I think is going under the radar is that decision to let them score What do you think about that decision to let him score? Was that the right call?
It's unfortunately the position they left them in and the position they gave them. I think it was the right call, because and I remember talking about this when it happened. I think it was. I want to know who really decided this, because I mean the Jets, I think, if I'm not mistaken, could have ran out the clock, and if not the entire clock, I think the Eagles get the ball back with, I don't know, 30 seconds, maybe. Maybe the Eagles had two timeouts.
Two timeouts, yeah, and it was
and there's
1:21 on the
just
clock.
after the 2-minute warning, right?
Yeah.
And so there, I think I understood what the solution was. You know, they were thinking, get it over with. They got a minute 46 is what was left on the clock after the touchdown. And I think the answer was, give them the touchdown. They were only down by 4, realistically, until they get the 2-point conversion. Then they're down by 6. And I think, realistically, you're thinking, all right, minute 46, 2 timeouts, surely they could finally march down the field. I think against a different defense, in different circumstances, they probably could. They could have ran down the ball, or they could have ran down the field, and they could have probably scored a touchdown. But I think that's where I go back to they got away from what was working, and they just kept trying to force deep throws, and they just kept trying to they weren't getting the ball out quickly, and I think that's either a comment on this offense or on Brian Johnson. But you watch some teams, and you know they can throw the ball. There's Mac Jones. He was throwing the ball less than 3 seconds after the snap. They had no problem moving the ball, whether it's his running back, his tight end, his wide receiver. It doesn't have to be a pretty 25-yard ball to A.J. Brown every other play. And sure, if you've got the answer to their cornerbacks and the safeties that are back there, then sure, you can throw that. But it wasn't working for 3.5 quarters. I don't know why you wanted to work it on the game-winning drive, or the potential game-winning drive. And so I think they needed to keep the offense simple, and they just needed to find a way to get the ball to the sideline, whether it's for 4 yards, whether it's for 2 yards, whether it's for 12 yards, and they just need to get the ball out of bounds so they could stop the clock, reset, give themselves another play with more time, or stop time. And instead, it was 3 short passes, and then they just went for the deep ball. And I don't even think those short passes looked great either. And so I think giving up the points is ideally, I think the analytics tell you it's the right idea. Because I think the other problem is the Jets could kneel out the majority of the clock and kick a field goal. And so then you're challenging the Eagles, okay, now you've got 30 seconds to go from the 25-yard line. You're thinking, what, you need to get to the New York Jets 40. So now you've got 25 seconds to go 40 yards instead of a minute and 50 seconds to go 75.
Yeah.
And I think that it was the right call, but I don't think they were not this week. They weren't capable of doing that.
Yeah.
And I think it becomes a different conversation too about giving up those points if Jake Elliott doesn't miss that field goal. If Jake Elliott doesn't miss that field goal and they still give up the 2-point conversion and the touchdown, they now have a minute and 45 seconds to get a field goal, tie the game, go to overtime. And so, not that you can control whether or not he's going to miss the field goal. You hope he makes it from that far in. I think it was 37, I think. I don't remember off the top of my head. And it's an unfortunate miss, but I think that goes as another one of those things of just, everything went wrong. Nothing went right. There was no real answer to their mistakes other than more mistakes. Outside, I think, of a few drives where the defense was able to actually get something done. But other than that, the offense didn't answer for any issues, and the special teams definitely not. The play, I forget what quarter it was in. I think it was the 4th when Ringo just absolutely blows up the returner before the ball even hits the ground. Yep. that was just, yeah, it was just a mistake to tack on to the list of issues I'm sure that they are going to hear about later this week. And it's just a game. I think you just got to get over it, and you just got to hope you make anything look better against Miami.
I agree. I think that's a great point. I think you brought up a great point with the Jalen Hurts and the time to throw and how long, how comfortable he got, taking his time to throw that ball. I don't think any offense is designed for your quarterback to hold that ball longer than 3 seconds. But who knows? Maybe Brian Johnson is.
I don't think there is either, and I think if you are either against a very bad defensive front or you have a very good offensive line. And I think it's something the Eagles are going to have to figure out. I think it was the third down right at the end of the game, and I think right off the snap, it's a quick little, I don't know, he's maybe 4 yards downfield. It's a quick little slant route. Grant Calcaterra is wide open. But the question is it's the last drive of the game. It's 3rd and long. Why is Grant Calcaterra the only guy that's open? And why is he's the only guy short of the sticks as well in a 4-down scenario. I just think there's a lot of bad things going on with the offense, and nothing's changed. I think they've gotten lucky, and they've had their moments where people go off, and then they just haven't actually had to answer for any of their problems. And I think a good look at that too is Jalen Hurts throws an interception against the Buccaneers. It's not a bad interception. It's a well placed ball. Thrown half a yard further, and I think Devontae Smith gets a 50-yard touchdown. But it's an interception, and the defense answered for that and got a safety immediately after. And there's a lot riding on the defense right now, and with all the injuries, there has to be something from the offense. There has to be one of those games where the offense has to do the job, and this was supposed to be that game. And I think it showed that either Jalen Hurts or Brian Johnson are stoppable, and there was no adjustment to fix that, and there was no adjustment to give anybody any sort of benefit. I mean, I know everybody hated Shane Steichen calling half a dozen, if not more, tight end screens last year, but it's surprisingly a play that works still. I'm pretty sure Dallas Goedert had one sometime in the first half, went for a good chunk of yardage. And it's one of those balls that you just gotta reach into the bag of something basic and just, get the hands that are hopefully going to catch the ball and not tip it to Quinnen Williams. And just hopefully he's got a block or two, even if it's just Jack Driscoll standing in the way. There's just some plays that they should just be digging into Shane Steichen's bag of tricks and hope it works still, because there was a lot of stuff on the offense that was overused and shouldn't have worked as often as it did. But because of the personnel they have all across this offense, it's still going to work.
Do you think this team's going to bounce back in a big way next week, or what's your feel on this? Miami's coming to town.
Yeah, Miami's coming to town, and I think luckily Tyreek Hill might not play. And I think that is the saving grace for the Eagles. I think that is going to be one of the only reasons they might actually be able to pull off the win is if Tyreek Hill isn't playing. They've got probably no healthy safety outside of Terrell Edmonds. I guess Mekhi Garner, if you want to put a 5th or 6th round rookie in the back of the secondary with Waddle and Tyreek Hill. Surely that's not a terrible game plan at all. And then I think if nobody else is coming back from the defensive line, then I think Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane are going to have 300 yards again. The Eagles have gotten away with, I think, a lot of bad offensive execution from their opponents, and they've managed to punish them and get away from it. But I think committing 0 turnovers from Zach Wilson even though most of their playmakers are out, understandable. But I think not being able to make a single turnover last night is an issue. It's easy as that.
I was expecting a turnover
for sure. And one big debate on Twitter today is the 50 passes. 50 passes is a big debate on Twitter today. And a lot of folks are suggesting that we should have ran the ball more. What did you see yesterday?
I mean, running the ball wasn't working. You can see that clear as day. DeAndre Swift, 10 attempts, 18 yards. It wasn't working. Kenneth Gainwell has 13 yards on 2 attempts, but that's probably not very sustainable, especially for Kenneth Gainwell. So I mean, that's, I think, one of those, back to what I was saying, just they weren't mixing things up, and I think without a wide receiver, they're trying to. I think they went with 47 passes because the Jets are missing cornerbacks left, right, and center. And sure, that's a good solution. That's a great solution if you're calling a good offensive game plan that can outplay practice squad corners when there's a good defensive coach on the other side. But running the ball has worked for this team for countless games. And I'm not going to remember a game from 2021, unfortunately, because I really like to remember exactly which game this was. You can call it the Buccaneers playoff game. You can call it the Raiders game or the Chargers game. Around the time when the Eagles finally learned in 2021 that they could run the ball for 300 yards and nobody would stop them, and they just kind of stopped, and they gave up, and they didn't do it, and they didn't do anything creative, and it almost went back to one of those games of when Doug Peterson was still in town, and he'd run the ball those 2 or 3 times, whether it was with Sanders or with Boston Scott or somebody else who might have been in the rotation at the time. He'd run the ball 2 or 3 times. You maybe get a total of 8 yards, maybe 1 first down if they were lucky enough, and then stop. Proving that they could run the ball, and they could run the ball relatively successfully getting short yardage, but they would never commit to it. And they would never change anything up. And it's kind of like watching Miles Sanders in Carolina. There's still all these gaps that he's not hitting, and there's still all these plays, and that's why I think playing with 3 wide receivers was a big struggle for the Eagles, because they're just trying to rotate DeAndre Swift into a receiver at that point, and he had 10 targets, and I think that's exactly where they kind of got screwed up. And I don't know how many of those came out of the backfield off the top of my head here, but I think that's a lot of targets for a running back, for him to not be putting up yards in the backfield, and they should have committed to that a little bit more, considering the pass wasn't getting anywhere. And I think New York was prepared for the pass because they knew they didn't have cornerbacks to do anything. You don't have Sauce Gardner playing. You've got to have a better solution than just trying to pass the ball 50 times.
And anything else that you'd like to add, Tyler?
Yeah, and if he's able to do that, I think so. But I think right now, coming into Monday, I think there's one guy right now in the organization who's got a lot of work to think about right now. And I know he probably is, because I don't think Howie Roseman is going to sit on his hands after watching this loss. He might. He most certainly could. I think a lot of GMs would, but the Eagles were 8-0, and they lost Jordan Davis about halfway through the game. Jordan Davis goes down. They get a little cooked up on the run, and then they go and lose their next game. And what do? Is they sign Ndamukong Suh, and they sign Linval Joseph. And then they go on to win a few more games. Well, he's out for a few weeks. And sure, you lose games. You don't have to blow up the team. You don't have to sell all your draft picks. You don't have to make all your trade deadline moves now. But the trade deadline's also in 2 weeks. I think with the unfortunate stretch of the way their schedule plays out, I think if you're going any type of all-in, and if the Saints' second-round pick, if the Eagles' first-round pick is up for grabs in the trade market, I think you got to make those trades now, because you're losing safeties left, right, and center. There's nobody healthy back there at the moment. And corners are dropping like flies, but they've got a lot on the roster, and supposedly none of them are serious injuries. But I think there's some need for a safety, a tight end, and a wide receiver. And maybe a few extra other positions here and there. But if Quez is out for 3 more weeks, and I've got to watch them essentially tip the plays off to defenses, you've got to find a solution with another wide receiver. And I don't care if it's just calling up Devin Allen and he just runs a streak for 75 snaps. I don't care. You need another wide receiver on the field because you're not passing the ball to Jack Stoll and Grant Calcaterra. And I don't care if it's Devin Allen, and I don't care if it's somebody they trade for that's worth a 7th round pick. If they want to go crazy and get Cortland Sutton or Jerry Jeudy, sure, like go crazy. Eat your heart out. Trade that Saints 2nd round pick for all I care. They're winning games. It's not worth that much anymore. But there's got to be some answers coming, because if there isn't sometime soon and they get smoked by the Dolphins, it's hard to look at a Week 8 at FedEx Field. It's hard to look at that and call that a win anymore, because they had to go to overtime, not that they should have, and then they have to play the Cowboys. And if the Jets' defensive line is going to eat up the right side that was put together yesterday, I don't even want to watch Chase Young, Daron Payne, or Micah Parsons in 3 weeks, because it doesn't get better. And that's kind of why they need to find some answers now, because if you can trade for a guy before Week 9, before the trade deadline's over, he's got 3 weeks to find a comfortable position and play to the best of his abilities by those 2 division games that they most definitely need to win. They can lose to the Dolphins, but they need to beat those 2 division games. Otherwise, we've got a lot more issues coming down the stretch of the season.
Tyler thinks it's Howie's season. I definitely agree, man. I think Howie's definitely going to make some moves here. Tyler, drop your handle so people can find you and expose your takes.
People can expose my takes. I'm gonna listen from last week. I've changed the handle. We have moved on. I am now Ty Happy. You can come and harass my takes as much as you would like there. That is where you can find me, and that is where I will be.
All right, perfect, man. I appreciate you once again, Tyler, for showing up on the show again. Always, man. All right, brother. Well, we'll get this off. Once again, thank you for your contributions. Fly, Eagles, fly, man. I'll talk to you later, Tyler.
Thank you, man. Have a good one.
You as well, brother.
And that is my conversation with Tyler. Once again, thank y'all for tuning in. I appreciate you for tuning in to the Way Outside the Nest podcast. I am your host, Hollywood J, with so much to say. Have a great week, y'all. Have a great week.